name is Jack Alston, Executive Director of the Pottawatomie County Economic Development Corporation and a former site selector with Paragon Decision Resources. The following is a strengths and weaknesses and labor analysis, much like a site selector's analysis of a given area. The following slideshow is a summary of documentation on the site selection factors and how they are rated in the Greater Manhattan area and Pottawatomie County. The interviews were conducted over a 5-month period with 45 employer interviews conducted all together with the major employers in the Greater Manhattan area. The factors that influence site selection and expansion are wages and benefits, labor availability, labor characteristics, commuting times and commuting patterns, or how easy it is to get back and forth to work, relocating and recruiting capacity, and services that affect the areas such as water, sewer, telecommunications, electric power, and local and state government, analyzing how efficient they are and friendly to business, and quality of life factors. Also critical with education, medical services, housing, recreation, culture, and childcare. The first step is to compare wages with source cities or cities that developers attempt to draw companies from. This slide shows Manhattan compared to Denver, Kansas City, Chicago, and Philadelphia. Manhattan has the lowest cost for manufacturing jobs, which includes welders and CNC operators. The next slide shows Manhattan versus competing cities or cities with universities in the Midwest. Manhattan is not only comparable, but also least cost for welders and CNC operators. On the next slide, we switch over to warehousing positions, and Manhattan versus source cities have the lowest wage by a significant amount of money. When you compare Manhattan versus competing cities, Manhattan has the lowest wage, but is somewhat comparable with Sioux Falls, South Dakota. When you compare office wages for computer technical support and customer service representatives with source cities, Manhattan has the lowest wage. When you're comparing with competing cities, Manhattan again has the lowest wage, but somewhat comparable to Sioux Falls, South Dakota. One of the key target industries for the Greater Manhattan area is in animal health and animal science. So we take wages and compare them with source cities. Specifically, with animal health scientists and animal lab techs, the data shows a substantial savings in wages when you're located in Manhattan versus competing cities. With animal health and animal science positions, the wages are similar to Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and less than other cities with universities such as Columbus, Des Moines, and Omaha. To summarize, Manhattan on wages are lower than all the source cities in the key sectors with locational fits for Manhattan. Wages in competing cities are generally higher in cities with a university presence. This is important to remember when recruiting for animal health scientists and technicians. Next, we analyze labor availability by asking industry leaders in the Greater Manhattan area the availability of labor on a 1 to 10 basis, and mostly of key employees. Labor availability is fairly good in the Greater Manhattan area. Recruiting management and engineers is about a 6, technical employees is about a 5.8, and recruiting clerical is easy. Naturally, recruiting skilled and semi-skilled workers is difficult here and all over the country, being fairly average in the Greater Manhattan area. When we compare Manhattan versus 2018, when we took the survey, actually the ratings are a little better, and that could be because of COVID-19 or it could be because of more product coming out of the technical schools. On the next slide, we look at Manhattan white-collar labor availability, and the ratings are fairly consistent. On the next slide, we take a look at blue-collar labor availability, and they're very similar to white-collar labor availability. The analysis demonstrate that Manhattan skilled labor availability is almost average, especially in the area of skilled welders and maintenance mechanics. There has been some improvements over the last 6 years in worker quality, at least in the skilled positions, but finding workers still remains an issue. Some firms looking for college graduates and using interns before they graduate, obtaining engineering and research technical skills is not an issue. The chart demonstrates that availability in all categories of employees has increased marginally across the board since 2014 and 2018. Labor characteristics such as turnover, absenteeism, attitudes, communication skills all rated a little better in 2020 versus 2018. The rating of almost 9 out of 10 is essentially very high. Communication skills, trainability, basic skills, and attitudes are all positive despite COVID, when normally attitudes are decreasing and absenteeism is increasing. This wasn't the case in Manhattan, where the white-collar characteristics in the next slide demonstrate that labor productivity is very high. Blue-collar ratings were also very good, with a little bit of turnover because of COVID. A summary of labor characteristics in the Manhattan area says that overall labor quality was rated very good to excellent in 2020. With some turnover occurring because of COVID-related issues, communication was also rated very good and actually better than in 2018. This is an important issue because of the tendency of employers normally state that millennials present communication issues often. It is not the case in Manhattan. In 2018, the scoring ratings were similar except for communications. These characteristics are generally higher than other areas of the country, especially California, Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. The pandemic has caused issues in workforce, and human resource managers have been feeling the impact and uncertainty of work, pay, benefits, and general depression. From our interviews, this has been prevalent, although less likely with construction. Considering all these factors, the Manhattan workforce scores in labor productivity and attitudes are solid, which demonstrates the high quality of the workers. Commuting in the city of Manhattan and the area is seen as a strength because of the fluid road system in the Manhattan area. Part of being an employer in the area is knowing the ability for the workforce to live within 30 miles of the city and be able to commute relatively easy with Highway 24 and 18. This provides excellent access in and out of the city. Testimony to that is the number of percentages of workers that do not live in the city of Manhattan. At the end of 2018, there were 12,000 commutes into the city of Manhattan daily. It also shows that the city of Manhattan has a net inflow of workers of 6,300. Pottawatomie County, in particular, has 35% of its workforce employed in the city of Manhattan. Commuting in and out of Manhattan and Wamego is fairly fluid, with improvements on Highway 24 coming as construction projects ending on Fort Riley and Highway 24 near Manhattan. Relocation and recruiting in Manhattan sometimes is problematic during the pandemic. Recruiting Kansas State graduates and those from inside the state appears not to be difficult. This is mostly due to the fact that those individuals are more familiar with Manhattan and its amenities than those from outside the state. The cost of a 2 or 3 bedroom home has increased and can impact the ability to recruit engineers and professionals from outside the area. Child care by itself does not normally prevent relocation, but it can cause problems with recently relocated professional families. One of the bigger issues in recruiting scientists and engineers and physicians is often the lack of diversity in diverse cultures. But the city of Manhattan has an aggressive program to help some of those issues and situations and get people from international backgrounds to feel more comfortable in the city of Manhattan. The quality of services such as water, sewer, electric, telecommunications, roads, planning, permitting, local government, and state government appear to be generally good in the greater Manhattan area. There are no impactful problems with water, sewer, or electric, and particularly good telecommunications, especially along Highway 24 from St. Mary's to Manhattan. There were some concerns about planning and zoning and permitting, but not enough to cause any alarm. The Manhattan City services in 2018 were similar, but only a few points lower than they were in 2020. There were significant issues with the state government back in 2018, but they don't appear to be issues in 2020. Pottawatomie County services in 2018 were all high, with lower ratings in 2018 for the state government and strong ratings for telecommunications and city-county relations. There were no differences between companies with white-collar workers and blue-collar workers. And there are very few concerns about services, as all of them scored 6 or above. There's some concern about gravel roads in Pottawatomie County, but the firms know that's an issue that's getting taken care of. The scores for water, sewer, and telecommunications rated very good to excellent. The permitting may take a little bit longer in Manhattan, but construction continued to take place as normal. Generally, the scores have improved from 2014 to 2020 for the services. Quality of life factors include schools, medical services, housing, both rental and owner-occupied, child care, recreation, and culture. Most of those ratings in the Manhattan area were extremely good, except for housing and child care, with schools getting almost a 9 and recreation and culture getting over 9. White-collar workers rated recreation and culture extremely high, and schools over 9. The housing issues are issues for both white and blue-collar workers. The next slide will show you that the blue-collar workers have issues with child care, housing, and a couple issues with the schools, but they're not so significant. In summary, quality of life rated very highly by the employers in the area, with some major concerns. Recreation and cultures are abundant in the region, with fishing, hunting, camping, and other activities, as well as Kansas State University. The public schools are rated highly across the board, as well as medical services. The human resource managers believe that the high schools in Manhattan may be a little too large, and several in Pottawatomie County employers mention the lack of availability of child care in rural areas, and this is becoming a bigger issue during COVID, since it impacts everyone, and parents may not have a home or facility to place their children. There are efforts through the Child Care Task Force for grants for some of the child care providers. Analyzing Manhattan's cost of living. When you show the slide of Manhattan versus source cities, Manhattan's cost of living of about an 84.4 and 89.4 for the composite score show that they're significantly less than Boston, Philadelphia, and Denver. When you compare the cost of living of Manhattan versus Indianapolis and Fayetteville, Arkansas, and Ames, Iowa, we are lower than Ames, but slightly higher than Indianapolis and Fayetteville. When you compare Manhattan average housing costs versus source and competing cities, and except for Indianapolis and Fayetteville, Manhattan is the lowest cost. In fact, Manhattan is much lower than Boston, Philadelphia, Denver, and some $40,000 less than Ames, Iowa. So if there's major issues, it might be the resistance to blue-collar training of the young, leading to shortages in skilled labor. But that's been recent improvements with the work keys testing that's been done in Pottawatomie County and elsewhere, and getting more students into internships while they're in high school, and stronger career pathways. Employing military spouses and young Kansas State graduates as interns is a big plus in the Manhattan area. Because of demand, the technical colleges need to enhance the programming and increase the number of students from the region. There's a big need to address more skilled training in mechanics, machine repair, machine tooling, CNC, and PLC. One of the last major concerns is both counties need to be more active in funding industrial sites to house new businesses and development. There's been some recent gains, especially in the Wamego area, with the development of another 27 acres and development of some private sector-driven space of over 100 acres just outside of Manhattan. Development of the K-State Foundation on the north part of the campus of Kansas State is continuing. Thank you. It's been a pleasure delivering this independent site selection analysis. My name is Jack Alston, Executive Director of the Pottawatomie County Economic Development Corporation. Have a great day, and thank you.